Hi, my name is Jennifer, and I'm here today to talk about the Lexicad team's work trying to attribute authorship to a chapter of the Stratagems of the Warring States, which is called Someone Spoke to the King in Jen. So for the past 6 months or so, we've been analysing this chapter, and it features an unnamed politician attempting to persuade the King of Han to form an alliance with Qin. So it's not one of the most famous chapters, but we're interested in it for another reason. We're interested in it because we think that it was written by Han Fei, the author of the Han Fei. So to try and work out whether this is or not the case, we have used similarity and clustering algorithms to analyze the chapter. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk a bit about how we did it. But first of all, I would like to talk about why it is important, why it is worth doing. And this is because if this is genuinely a Han Fei speech, then it must belong before the current first two chapters of the Han Fei. And these two chapters, they kind of drop us down in medias res. They don't really tell us a lot of the background to what is going on, which is a failed diplomatic mission from Han to the state of Qin 2,000 years ago. So if this chapter is legit, then it really gives a lot of clarification to what is happening in these existing chapters and explains a lot of the background to them. So what evidence have we got to back up this hypothesis? Well, we started out with the non-technical evidence, the evidence that doesn't require a computer to analyze. And that is both the style. So Han Fei had a very distinctive voice, and this chapter just feels very familiar. There's the pronoun use, there's the structure of the arguments, there's the tone that is used. But that alone, obviously, is not enough to write an academic paper on, or to justify spending months running natural language processing algorithms. So there's also some contextual evidence that we felt backed up this claim. So the first part of this is the fact that this chapter follows another one, which is called Speaking to the King of Han, which is very stylistically similar to other chapters that are either by or purporting to be by Su Qin. So it has multiple references to these sort of early exemplars from Confucian thought, and it has a focus on defensive or vertical alliance strategies to protect against Qin, and it concludes with this exhortation about the urgency of preserving the state, all things that Su Qin tended to do in his speeches. Unfortunately, this chapter is too short for us to really run computer analysis on effectively, but I feel like it's a pretty decent bet that even though this chapter is unattributed, readers were supposed to interpret it as being a Su Qin speech. So normally, a Su Qin speech would be followed by a counter-argument given by Zhang Yi in favor of an alliance with Qin. So that implies that this chapter, in turn, is intended to be read as a Zhang Yi chapter. However, a lot of Zhang Yi's actual speeches have been lost in the years since he was alive, and they have been substituted by the Han Dynasty compilers of the book for other speeches, either stuff that they made up or stuff that they took from elsewhere. And at least one of these is known for a fact to have been written by Han Fei. Moreover, we have to deal with the fact that the author of this speech, he speaks as though he's an insider in the court of Han. So he clearly knows anecdotal details about the assassination of Han Xialei, which is an event that took place over 100 years previously, and which is reported in a very confused manner in the history books, and gets confused with another assassination that took place around the same time. But this guy clearly knows the intimate details of it. Moreover, the language that he uses suggests that he was part of a collegial group with the other advisors of the King of Han. Now, Zhang Yi did have a record of ingratiating himself in foreign states, but there's no record of him having done it in Han. So how did we do this analysis? Well, we started out with this very standard basic text similarity measurement algorithm, which is cosine similarity. So in the first round, we compared Speaking to the King in Jen to two excerpts from the first 14 chapters of the Han Feizi, which are the ones that are most likely to be by the historical Han Fei, as well as two sections from the Stratagems. For those sections, we chose the ones that can be assumed to be closest in time to the Han Feizi, which is the latter part of each book, essentially. Then we compared Speaking to the King in Jen to a selection of excerpts from other roughly contemporaneous texts, just in an attempt to demonstrate that, if there is a resemblance between Speaking to the King in Jen and the Han Feizi, then this isn't a fluke. It's not something that we find with other randomly selected texts. So we just chose a bunch of texts that are reasonably long, long enough to provide 10,000 character excerpts, and we also included the Kongtongzi just because that actually plagiarizes half a paragraph from Speaking to the King in Jen. And then once we'd done that, we used some clustering algorithms just to check for the effect of topic and the effect of rare characters on the final output. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail later. So jumping straight to the results, as you can see, when we compared Speaking to the King in Jen to segments from the Han Feizi and the Stratagems, they were actually closer to the Han Feizi sections than to any of the Stratagems extracts that we used, including to the ones from the Han chapter, which you would expect to be reasonably close. And also, if you just looking at the tables with the raw data, you can start to see clusters beginning to emerge. So despite the fact that the Stratagems texts were by multiple authors, they do have a strong degree of internal consistency, which kind of implies that Yu Xiang, the editor from the Han Dynasty who compiled the text, and his team, they probably intervened quite a lot to make this text a more uniform whole. And obviously, the Han Feizi chapters, they also have a strong degree of internal consistency, just because we deliberately selected the ones that were probably by the same guy. So what happens when we lump Speaking to the King in Jen with either of these two groups? Well, if we amalgamate it with the Han Feizi texts, then yeah, internal consistency does drop a little, but then you're going to see a certain amount of drop just as a result of it becoming a longer text and having a higher number of characters in. But if we lump it in with the Stratagems, then the internal consistency drops a lot more, which suggests that if it belongs with either group, then it probably belongs with the Han Feizi group. In the second round of testing, when we compared Speaking to the King in Jen with both Han Feizi texts and extracts from other texts, again, it was more similar to the Han Feizi than to any of the other texts that we checked. The only slight exception to this, the one that came closest, is the Xinzi, which is interesting given that Han Fei is traditionally supposed to have studied under Sun Quan, so you could expect a certain level of similarity there. However, there are a few statistical issues with this, just relying purely on this one measure. The first is the issue of the structure of the classical Chinese language itself. So methods of linguistic similarity analysis, they were designed mainly for use on modern languages, where there is a certain statistical distribution of words. So it's a pretty flat, normal distribution. You've got rare words, and then you've got quite a large pool of common vocabulary in the middle. On the other hand, classical Chinese you've got a far bigger hump in the middle. They rely on a much smaller core vocabulary, and then the tails stretch out a lot further. So the statistical distribution of the language is different, and we kind of suspected that this would mean that rare characters would be overweighted in the final output. So to take a random example, if you've got a Zhuangzi story, he might use this very restricted set of very common characters for 99.99% of the story. And then there'll be some really obscure reference to a species of lizard or a butterfly or something that'll drag the whole story off in a completely different direction and have a disproportionate effect. And with modern languages, it's actually the opposite problem that researchers tend to encounter. It's that the analysis overweights common words and minimizes the effect of rare words, so people actually correct for that statistically. In this case, obviously, these corrections don't really apply. The second one is a related problem, which is the problem of topic bias. So obviously, if you've got two writers who are talking about the same topic, you're going to get a reasonably high similarity score between their texts. And this doesn't mean that they're the same person. It just means that they're using a lot of topic-specific vocabulary. So we wanted to control for the effect of rare words and also for the effect of topic words. So how we did that was by using a Manhattan distance algorithm to produce clusters of text. And the idea behind this is that we can look at an analysis that uses the full text, so full text including rare characters, including topic-specific words, and so on, and then compare that to versions of the text where we have taken out every single word that could possibly be topic-specific or could possibly be rare. So we took out every word that did not appear in every single text, leaving a very restricted vocabulary behind, as you can see here. So with all the characters included, with the topic words, with the rare characters, you can see that Speaking to the King in Gen, as we said before, does come out as being more similar to the Handfeidser. Then, when we get rid of topic-specific words and rare words, Speaking to the King in Gen is still more similar to the Handfeidser, though the effect is still reduced, it's still present. What does this mean? It means that whatever the authors of these texts were talking about, doesn't matter the topic, the basic grammatical and syntactical structures that they used were more similar. So whoever wrote Speaking to the King in Gen, his basic way of writing and of speaking was closer to that of the author of the Handfeidser than to the multiple authors of the Stratagems of the Warring State, even when we take out all possible references to specific topics. In other words, they had a similar style. So these are not terribly sophisticated text analysis models by modern standards when we have all these sort of machine learning and AI systems. So we've been working to improve them, and we've been working with a team from the National University of Seoul to build a teapot pipeline. And what this does is it will take a set of features that are specified from a given data set. So in our case, at the moment we have cosine similarity, sentence length variance, and we're adding in a few others. And it'll split the text up, feed it through a series of models, process, and eventually pick on the best possible model for analyzing these texts, which you can then use to analyze them. So this system that we have made, it is already working very well for English and modern Chinese, and we're just tweaking it slightly to be able to deal better with classical Chinese. Obviously, when that is done, we're going to run the data again and get the results, and we're hoping to publish a paper on the topic within the next year. So yeah, thank you very much for watching the video, and we're always interested in collaborating on other projects. So if you have text that you want to analyze, I mean, we've got clients that are interested in looking for forgeries among ancient documents. We've got clients who are sort of interested in trying to work out who Satoshi Nakamoto is. You can get in touch, send an email, you can call me, you can follow the project on Twitter, or just, get back to me in the comments. Thank you very much, and yeah, I'll hopefully see you at some point in the next 12 months with additional results.